I'm just waiting for the timer to start.
Okay.
I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube, joined by Gordon. Gordon, how are you, man?
Doing okay. Doing okay. Really glad to be here.
We are here to talk 1897, the 1897 arc from the original Dark Shadow series. So this starts off by introducing what appears to be the ghost of Quentin, and he is really doing damage to David and Amy. What were your thoughts on that?
Ooh, this was. It was really. It was brutal, like emotionally, simply because they were silent.
Right.
And they did. Dark Shadows did the thing with the the shadows of the night, that dee 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 dee, and with that, a bunch of your viewers and listeners just turned off. So.
No, I think what they do so well here from the setup is when David and Amy go into the West Wing. I love how they use an old timey telephone from 1897, and it's not connected, but the phone's ringing. Dark Shadows always had great psychology, and I love how they use this here. Here's this phone, it's ringing, and when they go into the West Wing, they're saying, in and out of it, they're saying about a brother, a Quentin Collins, and they look into the family history book and they spot a picture. Now we don't get to see it right away,
Right.
but they sort of make a I don't know what to describe it. I want to say like a rubber doll almost of Quentin. It's sort of like life sized, if you will, for those at home.
Yeah, it's the G.I. Joe version of Quentin Collins.
Right. Thank you. I couldn't quite think of how to describe it, but that's perfect. And then eventually the doll becomes, well, Quentin, and it's David Selby. So David Selby does not talk during this whole thing until we go back to 1897. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the great strengths of Dark Shadows, as you said, wasn't just the psychology, but they knew they were operating on a budget. So they knew that there wasn't a lot they could do. And in fact, with the whole dream sequence and Adam thing before, you could tell that they were kind of experimenting with some of that stuff. But I think by doing the whole, there's this wing of the house that no one's been in, and you've got this phone that I'm sure they were like looking through like a prop cover and they go like, okay, there's a Victrola. Oh, there's an old timey phone. There's a table, and just put it in. Like none of it feels like manufactured. It wasn't like but I think having the ghost of Quentin Collins and the ghost of Beth Chavez not speak has a real impact, because for one thing, it just allows Selby and I'm forgetting the actress who played the maid.
Terry Crawford, I believe.
Terry Crawford just allows them to act.
Right.
And Selby really does a good job of just being menacing without a word. Because as usually, if you give someone creepy dialogue, it can make or break a performance. But giving someone you don't have dialogue, what you just need to do is just glower and wear a blue suit really well. That, I think, helps. It also helps that the source material that they cribbed from, Turn of the Screw, I've actually read it, and it's one of those. I mean, it's a similar plot. Governess has two kids, and there are these two different ghosts that are visiting them, and it's written in such a way that you can interpret it as either, yes, there are ghosts, and this is purely supernatural, or the governess has issues, and she's just projecting the ghosts. Like here in Dark Shadows, we know they're ghosts. I don't think David and Amy have been mixing Pop Rocks and cola in their They're starting to like hallucinate. I think, and I think Dark Shadows is really good at it's good at tension. It's good at really just ranking. And being a soap opera helps, because if you're on 5 days a week, your pacing is not going to be super fast. You're going to want to make sure people watch every single minute.
I love how David and Amy go through a lot of stuff. They debate telling the adults, and then they get punished for it. One of my favorite scenes is prior to them going back to 1897, them burying the chest. Lewis Edmonds salutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like, for all the tension that's about to happen, it's one of those moments you could sort of laugh, but it's sort of like the last time you're laughing for a while, because it's cute. And I love what David and Amy do too. They're sort of, where Terry Crawford and David Selby have to be silent. David and Amy are the ones selling for the ghost. They're selling for what the characters are telling them to do. When Quentin punishes them, they're selling. It's really just, it's great. This is what happens when you have great writing and great actors to sell your writing.
Yeah, and the 1897 storyline, it's actually the longest storyline in the entire show. And here's where you get the writers at the top of their game, because they know what works, what doesn't. And I'm sure they just, in whatever writing meeting they just had a person with a legal pad writing down ideas, and they figured, okay, they'll go through them further. You've got production staff, directors, set designers, or whoever, who you throw them a challenge and they'll bring it every time. You've got an acting troupe who's at the top of their game, and who have proven that, you can go in, you give them a script and they'll do it. If they gave Jonathan Fritz, say, okay, you're going to play Barnabas, but you're wearing Groucho Marx glasses and a grease paint mustache, he'd do it. Yeah. He could sell it. And you also have an audience that right now has just come off. One, they're dealing with, this was like 68-ish to 69. So you're dealing with, there's stuff where you just don't want to, when you turn on the TV, like the problems of a vampire and a family dealing with spooky stuff is the best relief. But what it also does is it introduces a secondary character, and there's never any sense of competition between the two. Like, you never get the sense of, the characters might be dealing with different issues, but it really feels like a very smooth transition for Selby to kind of take over, because I know Frid took some time off to direct a play. And so there's this really great mix. And in thinking about and viewing some of the clips from this storyline, you have kind of the two very basic archetypes in each character. Barnabas is the good man who did a bad thing and is being punished for it. He's a decent guy. He had a dalliance with someone, kind of not to be crude, he hit it and quit it. And he's being punished for that. The vampire curse. Quentin is the bad guy who's making his way towards doing good things. He's I don't think he ever quite becomes the hero the way Barnabas does, but you kind of see where he's at least moving forward in some manner. It's like, let me use a more modern example. Barnabas is the archetype for Angel on Buffy.
Right.
And Quentin Collins is the archetype for Spike.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this right now. I am not saying that Joss Whedon was influenced by Dark Shadows in creating those characters. What I am saying is that he plagiarized them outright. He is a thief and a liar and a hack. And shame on you, Joss Whedon. Shame on you. And if anyone wants to fight me on this, I will fight you and I will win.
See, this is what I've been trying to tell people for years. I'm glad you said it. But I really do think Whedon owes Dark Shadows.
I am not. I am, you know, if Dan Curtis's daughters are out there, if Jim Pearson's out there, if MPI is out there, um, you might want to start thinking about suing, because it's not even like a um, it's not even like Dark Shadows with the numbers filed off.
Right.
I think here it's done better because it's with the one thing about Barnabas is that he may complain and bemoan his fate, but he never whines about it.
Right.
And I think Quentin manages to. There's never a point where Quentin says, "I'm good and virtuous and I'm going to live a healthy life." He's still. You can still hear that kind of raconteur, kind of party guy, just antisocial dude. But you see at least him trying to get better.
Mm.
And I think it also helps that when we, at this point, when this, the two ghosts actually drive the Collins family out of Collinwood into the Holt house, and I am so sure. I think this is the one where they actually go to, like, the Quentin Collins ghost actually wins, or is that the 1840 storyline?
Yeah.
Because I think.
Well, that's sort of the thing. Our buddy Patrick McRae, in his book, his theory in the Dark Shadows Day book, link will be in the description box when we're done here.
Mm-hmm.
But his theory is that the ghost of Quentin is actually Judah Zachary trying to lure Barnabas back, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hell of a theory.
Well, if you think, well, here's kind of the way that this is a counter theory, kind of taking the whole, if you took all the history and just laid it out chronologically from 1690, okay, you've got 1690 is kind of Judah Zachary's first major defeat.
Right.
Okay. Then you move forward, and then 1795 is kind of the, okay, it's when, in theory, some of the supernatural shenanigans come to a head, because in the 1897, Barnabas discusses how Laura the Phoenix was married to Jeremiah, and that he had so that's kind of the first kind of skirmish that turns Barnabas into a vampire. And I could see, and let's assume Judah Zachary is a long player, a long game player.
Right.
So you've got now a new random element that I could see Zachary going, yeah, I opened the door. Here's the first strike. 1840 is where Judah Zachary it's the big defeat where things just get so messed up. But again, he's a long game player. So
Right.
He's going to see that as, okay, it's serious, but the damage is done. Right. 1897 rather, is where Bleep gets real. And things have been weakened so much that, Petofi is actually able to come to power. And you can also see where Petofi could be an agent of Zachary, because Petofi's history is that in 1795, he was a werewolf, got his hand cut off, and then did magic stuff to become immortal. And so then after that, you've got the Leviathan incursion around 1940s, Paul Stoddard. And then Barnabas is released in 1960 to wreak havoc. And then all that chaos kind of leads to Zachary's ultimate victory in 1995. But I do think it makes sense to, I could argue like Zachary or Petofi, because in order to have a ghost, you need someone dead. And if Quentin's an immortal, how can he be immortal and a ghost at the same time? Right. So I could see it being, I think Patrick is onto something. I would also argue Petofi, because Petofi in this storyline was trying to, I think, make Quentin immortal, because he was going to go into 1969 and take over Quentin then. Yeah. So it makes sense that Petofi might be like, okay, well, I got a vampire here, I got Barnabas here, but I'll leave him here and then attack the future through Quentin.
Right. That could be a possibility. It's a hell of a theory. I mean, both theories are very plausible, and I love them both.
Mm-hmm.
You and Patrick's. That's really amazing. I like that. What did you... Now, when they move into the old house, Barnabas... You have Barnabas and Professor Stokes and Julie Hoffman. They got the I Ching wands, and they're going to use that. They're going to use that for Barnabas to travel back in time. You know, the hexagram of change, and and what a change! Barnabas is going to become a vampire again. When
Mm-hmm.
that door, I gotta tell you, this whole sequence when they do this, it's so awesome and it's so creepy at the same time. Because as that door creeps open, I'm like, I know he's doing it for good reasons, but am I the only one going, don't do it, don't do it?
Well, I think at that point, you know, the Collins family is basically at the first of their various rock bottoms.
Right.
Okay. And I think that in order to sell the point that, you know, the first time they went back through time, it was completely an accident.
Right.
As they're at a seance, Vicky goes back. Here, it's deliberate. It's like, okay, we got these two ghosts. The kids are going nutso. You know, it's getting to the point where we're going to have to take away their monkeys records because, you know, they're acting like that Peter Tork guy. We don't want that. So yeah, that hexagram of change and wanting to go through those doors, which, and again, for a low budget soap opera, they did a lot, and you could tell that everyone was really thinking this stuff out. It wasn't like, okay, well, we're just going to grab like a door and stick it in. They knew how to shoot it. So yeah, there is that sense of inevitability. Yeah, I'm only drinking water tonight, folks. You know, I'll be drinking gin later. So
There's nothing wrong with that. But I'll say this: it's really... You're right. Even though Dark Shadows was not a high budget show, it was a low budget show. The things they pull off are really amazing. Even, you know, for a show that's, you know, set in its era in 1960s, in the 60s, and here's 1968. They show this door opening and Barnabas walking through it. And when the door opens, you see the chain coffin, and then he walks through the door, and the door closes, and boom, we're back in 1897. What a unique way to do that. I love that whole sequence.
Yeah, and it really, I think, shows how... I don't know. It would be interesting to read whether the writers and the writers actually knew how they were starting, or if they just said, let's go here and then wing it. Because like the first real storyline is basically, it's the introduction of the Collins family back in 1897, but it's also about Edith. I think I'm not Edith Collins, and I think she's Edward and Naomi's mother, dying and cutting Quentin out of her well.
Yeah, and you have Edith, who is cutting Quentin out of the will, and really, I love how when we see the house, we see Judith. Edward's not there yet, and Quentin is arriving. Quentin shows up. And he's talking. Like he has lines. Finally, he speaks. Right, David Selby speaks, and he's so charming. Like right away, he's charming. I swear to God, I felt like we were getting James Bond.
Yeah, he's charming, but he can turn on a dime and he will cut a dude.
Yep.
Because it is clear that the reason he came back is he ran off with Edward's wife, who will later learn. We'll later learn who she is, but and we've already spoiled it. So if you've been listening, folks, we're getting very timey-wimey here.
Yeah. For those who... Quentin runs off with Edward's wife, who's Laura, the Phoenix. And now what happened in Phoenix, in Cairo, I should say. Sorry, um, Cairo was on fire, and he saw Laura burn. So he
Mm-hmm.
says. So when she shows up, he's in shock. Like he he looked like he's seen a ghost, which is really cool. I love how they set up the Phoenix in 1897 here. Well, let me ask you, what do you feel was the better setup, the original Phoenix arc or this one?
I think this one, because when they did the first Phoenix arc, it was the first time, and
Right.
they didn't really think. And the way they set it up here is very clever. Um, if you were to do that today, you'd have a flash forward where Roger is looking through a book. Maybe it's the same book they identified Quentin in. It's like, oh, who's this person? Laura.
Yeah.
And then it would be like, oh, hey, she looks a lot like my dead wife who died in a fire.
Yeah.
Um, and you take out any of the tension. And at this point, I'm not sure how many people had been watching back during those days. So you set it up as okay, she's this creature. Barnabas gives the offhanded comment that, oh yeah, she's Jeremiah's first wife. I kind of had a crush on her when I was a boy, um, which means that and if you assume she's like mid 20, kind of 20s to 30s, that makes Jeremiah way older, but we're not going to go there. And it's this great thing of, for those who watched back at the first time, it's like they can see the pattern. It's like 1740s, 1897, 1960. Once a century, it kind of works out.
Yeah.
Um, it also brings a greater threat because it's not just, okay, it's not just a divorce gone wrong. It is Quentin ran off with this person, and this person is coming back for their child, for Jameson, and it's like, oh, like you kind of get the sense that it's the stakes are a lot higher because it's not just Laura doesn't get David, it's Laura went off with somebody else, presumably either faked her death or, went through this process and is going to repeat it again.
Yeah. It's a hell of a thing. I mean, I love the setup here. I'm gonna where I like the beginning a little bit is the the mystery of, well, what happened to the first Laura in Phoenix, Arizona? Did she willingly give her body up to this entity to see her kid? Did the entity promise something just to get a body? You know what I mean? It leaves you asking what really happened to the real Laura. You know what I mean? In Phoenix.
Well, actually, to me, it leads me to the question: was there ever a real Laura?
Right. There you go.
You
I like
know, or because that way, um, because I don't remember the first time. I know 1897. She's Laura Stockbridge Collins.
right.
I don't know what her maiden name was in the 1960s, but there is that sense of, and it's one of the things the writers are starting to do that a lot of modern shows like, oh, I don't know, Star Trek Picard season 2 tend not to do well. So they're laying the lore and they're laying Easter eggs, but but because this is all brand new, they're not as self-conscious.
Right. Yeah. I I really like how when they do 1897 lore, it is better done, I will admit, than the original. But there's something about that, like you said, it could be, was there ever really a real Laura? Even though what I've always found strange about the original Laura was Burke was in love with her too. She seemed to seduce men very easily. Like, Burke, if you go down the line, Burke, Roger, Quentin, Edward, Jeremiah, it's just like she could seduce men at will.
Well, if she's trying to get like a baby, because the Phoenix takes their child in with the flames, you're going to want to go for bulk here. You're going to want to you want your numbers to run high.
Right. Do you, Let me ask something, David. Who do you think the father is, Roger or Burke?
Hmm. I would have to say Burke, because Roger just seems he seems to have a pull in too much of a stiff pull in an inconvenient place to have a kid like David. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So in 1897, when Barnabas, well, Magda and Sandor are husband and wife. They're gypsies, but this isn't the first. Now, this is the first time we see Magda, but this isn't the first time we hear about her. We actually hear about her in 1968 when there's a séance. I want to say it's God, Professor Stokes, Vicky, Carolyn, um, Don Briscoe's character, not Chris
Chris
Jennings.
Jennings.
Chris Jennings are all at a séance, and Chris Jennings stops the séance when he hears the name Magda, and actually, Sarah David's character, Professor Stokes, confronts him on it. So, what did you think of that?
I think they were trying to, because we later learned that Quentin is Chris Jennings' great grandfather,
Right.
and I think Jenny was Magda's sister.
Yep.
So I'm sure that we all have families who we all have those stories in our families of both like the fun times, but the secrets. The so and so is not somebody else's real father, or so and so was secretly adopted, or and I think this is a case where I'm sure that Chris Jennings had that. He might not have known the names,
Right.
but he probably knew some of that stuff, and I'm sure that because technically, if you think about it, Chris Jennings would have every right to say, "Hey, I'm a Collins, give me my birthright."
Right.
And then David Selby would, Quentin would have to say, "No, no, 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 no. Hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm your grandfather, but you know what? I'm in charge.
Right.
I'm the mega daddy."
Yeah.
But I do think there might have been that kind of like family where, and that's one of the great things about this show is that it's as much about the kind of things that get hidden in families as it is kind of the big spooky supernatural stuff.
Yeah, there's something I always stress with Dark Shadows. There's a lot of secrets, in the Collins family. There's no shortage of them, and Chris. I do believe Chris. He clearly heard the name Magda,
Right.
Through somebody, whether it was somebody who was looking after him. It's really. I'd love to. Well, how do you think he heard the name? Do you think he just was told it eventually, or?
Yeah, at some point it's probably like, yeah, your great grandmother was sister, you're part Romani. Your great, there's not, there's not much about your great grandmother, but great aunt, your great great aunt was a seer named Magda.
Yeah.
Magda Rakosi. So I think there might have been that. It's kind of like with with my mom passing. There's a whole bunch of cousins who, because of some family issues, didn't get, were cut off from my mother. It wasn't my mom's fault. It's but they were asking me questions about what was going on. So
Right.
I've been trying to fill them in to bring them in. But it's so, but there are those secrets that sometimes don't get communicated for whatever reason. The person dies too early. So I do think, I don't think it's a case of I think Chris Jennings knew enough to be worried, but I don't think he was like, oh, wait, yeah, that means that my great grandfather was Quentin. So, because at that point he'd have to worry about, two things. One, alcoholism, because Quentin loved his booze.
Yep.
And two, it's like, okay, am I a painting come to life?
Yeah.
And is Amanda Harris my aunt, my et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Because Chris actually originally had a twin.
Yep, Tom.
Yeah, Tom. And Tom became a vampire. So it's kind of like, of course, I could just see now you'd have Tom would have lived, Chris would have been a vampire, and they would have been like crime-fighting brothers. They would get like an exclusive 20-week streaming series on Netflix.
They would too.
And it'd be written and directed by Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
Again, Joss Whedon is a hack, folks. He ripped off Dark Shadows.
That son of a bitch. Yeah. Yes, Joss Whedon. We hate you. Here's the thing too. I really like the fact that once because here's the thing. I could see like one of the gypsies just coming to Chris and going, they might have not have told him about Quentin, but they might have told him about Magda, because they did put Magda on trial for this.
Mm-hmm. And they could have easily told him, like, basically something as general as never trust a Collins.
Right. Yep. Which
Absolutely. Means that, you can kind of steer people away from investigating their past. That way you never have to worry about someone finding out like the circumstances of their birth. It's like, the Quentins, the Collins family gave our family trouble very early on. You want to stay a hell away from them.
Yep. So Magda, her husband Sandor releases Barnabas out of the coffin, and he bites Sandor. Sandor's now working for Barnabas, sort of the way Willie was, and he tells Barnabas tells Magda to let the let the family know that they're going to receive a visit, and so she does, but she sort of takes her own words and sort of adds some that he's not to be trusted, which I found really interesting. Magda's a bit of a troublemaker, isn't she?
Yeah. Well, and you got to consider the fact that they were squatting in the old house. I mean, let's be clear. I don't think Edward said, "Oh, that nice gypsy couple, we'll let them stay there." Yeah, she seems fine. He seems no. They were squatting, and of course, Magda's going to be a troublemaker. Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that Julia didn't come back in time and kind of smack her around and say, get on the good foot. But of course, that would mean, like, because Grayson Hall played both roles, a lot of, but they'd have to figure it out, and so it's just easier to kind of let her do her thing. But yeah, you get this thing that they're troublemakers until they hand up a toffee, and then they go.
Yep.
They stop.
Yep. They're really, I think the gypsies are really, like you said, they're troublemakers, and they have no problem telling you how they feel, and they have no problem sassing back. But like, I agree with you. Once the hand of Patofe comes into play, it's all business.
Mm-hmm.
It's no more games. And it really, what Magda's not saying to him too, and I know we're jumping around a bit, but there's a lot to cover with it.
Right. Yeah. This is I think the longest storyline in Dark Shadows history.
Right.
With good reason.
Yep. Absolutely. And what Magda hasn't told everybody else is she just took the hand. She didn't tell any gypsy that she took the hand. She stole it, and that's what gypsies do. So,
well, she might have thought it was a monkey's paw. It's like, hey, I can get 3 wishes, and oh wait, wrong hand.
I like that, Gordon. I like that. Yeah, I grabbed the wrong box, guys. It's okay. No, it's not.
Yeah. I was expecting a stone hand with a ring that would make me say Eldrad must live. Doctor Who reference for those in the audience.
Oh my God. That is great. I love that, man. So no one knows, once the gypsies realize she has it, they're going to be on the hunt, and she knows time's against her. So when we see Evan Hanley and Quentin with the hand, we meet Aristide, and I love Aristide's entrance. I know he works for Ptofe, but what a henchman! What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, you have someone who's not just the like usually a henchman for a character like Patofi is someone who's just kind of like, oh my God, he's so powerful. I'm scared. I don't want to mess up. Ersi's just like, you know what? Hey, I work for the big guy. He can, trash bozos better than anybody. So I'm just here to make sure things go well for him.
Yep, he he really is one of the best henchmen, obedient servants. Really, even
Mm-hmm.
I dare say more so than Willie. If I had to take my pick, who would you pick for loyalty? I'd say Aristide because he's loyal to a fault even in every
Mm-hmm.
way. I mean, it's really, he has no bones doing whatever if Patofe tells him, he does it. Jump, he'll do it. I mean, he's just that loyal to the guy. And I love how he carries the knife, the dancing lady, he calls it. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is basically he knows his place.
Yep.
And that I think is the key to that character. He knows his place and he's okay with it. Whereas with Willie, he knows his place, but it's not really a friend. It's like I know there's some people who think Barnabas and Willie are friends. It's like no, it's
Uh,
it's Stockholm syndrome, you know, basically.
yeah,
Actually, let's rename it from Stockholm syndrome to Collins syndrome because that seems to happen all the time in Collinsport.
I like that. I was explaining this to a friend of mine. He asked me. He said, "Well, do are Barnabas and Willie friends?" And I started laughing. I said, well, I said, let me ask you a counter question. Do you beat your friends with a wolf's head cane? No, no. So, no, they're not friends, but you could say they become friends eventually. There's a trust. There's a mutual trust, but other than that, no. With this, it's whatever the master says with Aristide and Patofe, Aristide does, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
beautifully portrayed. I mean, it's really well done. So I gotta ask you this: what did you think of Reverend Gregory Trask?
I love how he's written in a much more sinister way
Yep.
than the original Reverend. Because the original Reverend Trask, the 1795 Trask, was just, ooh, witches, or I'm going to go after witches, but yeah, I'm a bit of a hypocrite. Here we see he is a hypocrite from the start.
Yep.
We see that he is, I if I think if we were to do, if there were a companion series to Dark Shadows called the Trasks, um, this would be the one where we'd probably find out that yeah, the Trasks have always been jealous of the Collinses.
Yep.
Um, and the fact that Trask is starting to do this school and he's got a governess and his daughter, it's like they're really setting this guy up to be, he's not the obnoxiously loud, obvious villain. He
Yep.
knows how to play the villain very finely. He can do the whole pious reverend, but yeah, he's a schemer. He's just probably not as overt about it.
Yep. I really like the fact that he has some sort of healing power, or seems to have it. But I honestly think just Angelique lifted her curse on Quentin when that happened. That's how he got Quentin out of that. So you really, he's really a creepy character, and not just Tim Shaw, but the woman Catherine Lee Scott plays the governess.
Oh, Rachel
She's
Drummond?
Yeah, Rachel Drummond. Sorry, she's really afraid of him, and I got to give a shout out to my buddy Mark Gilman. He brought this up. Do you think that maybe Trask sexually abused these kids?
You know, I'm going to dance around this question a little bit, only
Okay.
because I don't think in the 60s they would have had the knowledge or the willingness to express that. I
Right.
will say I think he emotionally abused them and
Yep.
psychologically abused them. So I will say that because I don't think the writers had that much. I don't think the sexual abuse. Now, if somebody said, "Hey, I think he did," from our perspective, we'll not argue. So I'm dancing around the question, but because I don't think they had that awareness. But I
Right.
do think that yeah, he's psychologically abusing them, he's emotionally abusing them. He's basically, "Hey, I'm the boss, you're nothing, so you're going to follow me."
I think when it comes to the Trask too, not just Gregory, but when you look at Reverend Trask, the family itself just has a history of being psychological bullies. They really do. They have no problem just downgrading people who they feel are less than them, and who people who even think or want to challenge any kind of authority that they believe they should have. I do think I agree with you. There is a lot of psychological abuse that goes on, and you can
Mm.
Rachel Drummond, Catherine Lee Scott, obviously great actress, really does sell that. She does sell that abuse, from
Mhm.
some, the psychological, I mean, but now to be to be fair to Mark, and could I see that it with the perform a bit. I think
Mhm.
there's, you know what I mean. There could be that because the way how she's selling it, it's like, well, okay, if it's just mental abuse, why are you just scared to go back? Like, you know what I mean? Because she was working with kids, she was teaching kids, and she even seems to be afraid for the kids themselves.
Well, something to keep in mind, and again, this is a 2022, something we've learned since then,
Right.
is that a lot of times when you're going through extreme abuse, you experience PTSD.
Right. Yep.
So again, it's and I'm sure that if Patrick McRae were here, he'd have a very eloquent counter argument and
Yep.
say why I'm wrong, but he is not here. So um, certain things you can kind of assume. Some things from our timeline you can't necessarily transplant simply
Right.
because they just didn't have the knowledge of it. Um, I could see where the writers, if they came from, say, like I went to Catholic school
Yep.
on the south side of Chicago in the 1970s. I mean, that was the last of the real of the real hardcore nuns hitting you on the hand with rulers. Do not mess with us. So I can see where they're bringing that experiential piece into it.
Yep.
Um, I don't know if they were that, and I'm making an assumption here. I don't know if any of them were aware of that kind of the extent of that. But I
Right.
think it also helps that Catherine Lee Scott does sell it so that even if the writers aren't doing it, or if the writers were writing her as basically generic woman for whatever reason. I mean, that's the great thing about the cast. I'm sure that if you handed them random words from the phone book, they could sell it convincingly.
Yep. How how heartbreaking is Rachel Drummond's death? I mean, it's just gut punching.
Yeah, it's just not good. It's one of those where you kind of it's maybe one of the few times in with Dark Shadows, there's always like the smaller evil victories before the good guys win.
Yep.
And those smaller victories are just, you kind of go, okay, yeah, we know that good will prevail.
Yeah.
This is the first time, at least I'm willing to be wrong, but I think maybe this is the first time in Dark Shadows where it's not necessarily guaranteed that good will win.
Yep. This, I talked about this with Patrick with the 1995 arc, that it feels like it's being written and directed by George A. Romero.
Mm-hmm.
But you sort of get that sense in 1968 too, that it feels like we're watching something from the mind of George A. Romero. That
Yeah, because he's really good at that. Like he does not pull punches, and he takes a very realistic approach. Like if you see one of films like The Crazies
yeah,
or Dawn of the Dead, or I'm trying to think of a lot of his. I'm trying to think of examples of his post um, Night of the Living Dead work that I've seen. He doesn't do the okay, everybody lives happily ever after. I mean,
Yep.
in Night of the Living Dead, the lead character gets shot by accident
Yep.
because they think he's a zombie.
Yep.
So yeah, there is that sense of, and it may just be that kind of vibe in the air around 68 where, you know, just search for 1968 in review, and that pessimism is in the air. So, but it does have that feeling like Rachel Drummond's death does have a feeling like, they're just not fair. And it's not done to be cheap, and it's not done to just like drive ratings. It's a real, it's like you said, it's not a gut punch, but it's also, it's like okay, things are getting real right
Yeah.
now.
It's really, it, too, it's a defining moment, too, because a lot's going on. You have the other caretaker, he's a vampire, who's played by Roger Davis. Dirk Wilkins, sorry.
Right.
I got the name of it. Dirk Wilkins is a vampire because of Barnabas. And Laura is long gone by this point, and he wants her back. And Barnabas, I can't give that to her, to you. So he has Judith shoot her. And it's just like when I was watching this, and even when I go back, I'm still telling myself, no, they're going to save this girl. And it's like, no, they're really not. And when it happens, it's just like, oh my God, they just killed Rachel Drummond. Here's this girl who had a miserable life and misery with Trask. And it's just like, you wanted this. Like, there's no, we always hear there's no happily ever after Dark
Right.
Shadows.
And I'm sure there were people who were watching at the time thinking, oh, they're going to pull the Josette thing and Barnabas is going to rescue her because he's going to identify her as Josette. And nope, I
Nope.
don't think they did any of that with Rachel Drummond, which was a smart move.
No, they really, I think they do one little tidbit, but it's so quickly pulled back. You're right. It's not even worth mentioning, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think he just looks at her like she looks like Gisette, but he moves on from it pretty quickly, which I'm glad they do. So you're right. They don't do this. Oh, she's gonna get saved. No, she gets shot. She gets killed. And I love the after. Dark Shadows has a beautiful, for every action, there's a reaction. There's a consequence. There's a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Shadows was great with, hey, your actions, there will be severe consequences. It had that, I guess you would say, that real feeling of you can't just do something without something else happening.
Yeah, there's a very deep morality in Dark Shadows.
Yep. Yep. And so when she comes to, and Reverend Gregory Trask, he's like, and Tim Shaw's telling, she killed Rachel. She shot Rachel. I saw it. Go ahead and call the police. Turn me in because she's going to jail too. And then the deal is cut. I I love and I hate this scene at the same time because it's like you're wanting some sort of justice for Rachel. How did you feel about that?
Ah, I think it just really shows. It shows kind of the character of the Collins family at this point, where we're so used to seeing them as the good guys,
Yeah.
or we forget that this is a family. They got some issues going on, not just that, their one ancestor is a vampire, another guy is going to be a werewolf, the eldest male turns out to be an alcoholic who just so happens to look like Louis Edmonds.
Yeah.
Um, you've got this blonde woman who shows around, who comes around, who plays with fire and does magic stuff. Um, you know, and you've got, and I think you need that. Sometimes you need a reminder that maybe the Collins family isn't worth saving.
Yeah. Do you think Tim Shaw getting his hands on the hand of Patofe was really the ultimate X factor of what got Patofe his hand back in a weird way.
Yeah, because I think most of I think looking at the characters there, they would have said, oh, okay, we got a hand here. Whose hand is this? And once they find out, they would have, I think the Collinses would have thrown it in the West Wing, bricked it up like they would later on, and just forgot about it. But I think because Shaw got it, and he's a neutral party. He's
Yeah.
not. I think that series that led to the chain of events that led to Count Patofi coming back.
Yeah. I love how they sort of pull a move out of the shadow here. That Patofi doesn't come as Patofi. He comes as Fitzgibbons, I want to say. I might be
Yeah, he comes as stereotypical British guy.
Yep.
Because and I think first it gives David a little bit more meat to chew on in terms of the role. But I think if you're and Patofi is really the first major big bad of Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
He's approaching this the way that a smart strategic person would do it. He's sending Aristide to kind of get some of the ground level stuff. And he's coming in. Patofi is not doing the, hey, I'm Patofi, I'm a badass. He's coming to figure out who the players are. Yeah. Because ultimately, Patofi is, if Judah Zachary was kind of like the big, powerful leader, Patofi could easily be one of his sergeants. You know what I mean? He could be like the strategist. And the fact is, Patofi's the one who comes up with he's not about, brute force, for lack of a better term. He's more about cleverness and trying to figure things out in a creative way.
Yeah. He's, in many ways, he's the guy he'll come in, like you said, not as himself, but he's coming in as someone else. So, and what I love about here is we keep in mind, for those who have never watched Dark Shadows, we hear about the hand of Patofu. We've seen the hand up until this point, but we've never seen the person of who Patofu is. So when this Gibbons guy comes in, you're not thinking nothing of it until it's like, well, wait a second.
Yeah. You think it's like Thayer David is doing a comedy piece. You know what I mean? You think that it's not it's the characterization. It's not what he says or does. It's the way he's written. It's like, oh, okay, here's this goofy English guy that we're just going to throw in. Yeah. Versus no, it's great misdirection on a writing perspective.
Right. Something I've talked about is when Dark Shadows does misdirection, they don't misdirect you to piss you off. They misdirect you because it's part of their plot, and it's something they're doing to keep you in suspense, and it's going to have a payoff later. And this is just another one of those. It's going to have a payoff.
Yeah, because later in the storyline, we can talk about that point. There's a moment where you think, how did the show continue on from this? And then later on, you realize that, okay, yeah, they had an idea as to how it would pay off.
Right. And I love, really, the reveal. The real reveal comes when Julianka dies. Mm-hmm. After Julianka dies, they're meeting. They still think it's Gibbons. That he doesn't say he's Patofe, and Magda, the hand comes off. The fake hand comes off. There's this mark. The mark of Patofe was on Julianka's body, on her part of her body. Well, he's got the same mark. He's Patofe. That's when the reveal's made, and it's like, oh shit. Mm-hmm. It really is one of those moments where you're just like, things just got real bad.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's one of the great things about this storyline is that it has a sense of dynamics to it, where it never feels like with 1795, you kind of get the sense like, okay, this happens, because it's all laying out how Barnabas became a vampire. I mean, it's Barnabas's like it. This really feels like you could easily in a different in a band of parallel time, shall we say, you could take the 1897 sequence and turn that into the first official Dark Shadows spinoff.
Yeah.
Because it just has that sense of it never quite feels like the same show, you know, and it gives you that sense of this isn't just a soap opera that we're cranking out for afternoons. You
Yep.
can see why people really love this show.
Yeah. I think too with 1897 to sort of give it the real big difference with 1795. I wouldn't classify 1897 as just an origin story. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's not. It
Right. You
really
know what I mean?
isn't. It's a story in its own right.
Yep.
Because if you think about it, it starts with we got to figure out who Quentin Collins is to stop the ghost.
Yep.
Then it's the Will shenanigans, and then as it moves on, it's Petofi comes. It's and kind of what he does. It's Letitia Trask's daughter gets taken over by the ghost of a singer. Fools around with John Carlin as the Joker Collins. We'll just call him that. All he needs is the white makeup and the red lips. I think that if the Batman show had been on that late and Cesar Romero quit, they should have hired Carlin as the Joker. He could have sold it.
They could have. I love. What did you think of? Here's Carl Collins pulling a gun on Barnabas. What were your thoughts on
it? All I can say is, I'm sure that John Carlin, when he got the script, read it and thought, "Oh, I'm getting paid to do this. I can't believe it." Yeah, and I think the fact that they established Carl Collins as kind of a jokester, where that character could have gotten very tiresome very quickly, and I like that they kind of moved, they kind of quickly got rid of him, and that I think when Quentin finds out, I think there's a little bit of tension, but when Quentin finds out, and this is one of the brilliance of this storyline, when after Quentin gets the werewolf curse, and he finds out Barnabas is a vampire, he doesn't do the thing of, oh, well, I'm a werewolf, but he's a vampire, he's worse, he's got to be killed. He even says at one point, now I understand why you're trying to help me.
Yep.
And that, I think, is one of this could have easily been a werewolf this could have been Twilight 50 years early.
Yeah.
Vampires versus werewolves.
Yeah.
Again, Twilight, Stephanie Meyer, you ripped off Dark Shadows. Shame on you.
And I think, too, the writers, too, for Dark Shadows were smart enough not to do that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think they're smart enough to go, you know what? This isn't a werewolf versus a vampire situation. We need to have Quentin make the realization, hey, this guy has already helped me before. This is why he's helping me, because he knows, right? Like you said, he knows how he feels.
Yeah, to kind of misuse a wrestling term, this is the complete opposite of a heel turn.
Yeah.
Because Quentin starts becoming a hero, not in the sense of he's always good, but that he realizes, hey, maybe being a selfish jerk who likes to drink a lot isn't a good idea. Maybe I should be a noble jerk who drinks a lot.
To use the wrestling term, they're making him a baby face.
Okay, making a... I did a podcast with a wrestling fan for so many years, and I don't get it. I'm sorry, Brant Fowler, if you're watching this, I apologize. I should have been listening to you. So make a baby face as you're good. Heel turns when you turn evil. Okay, got it.
Yes, and like wrestling, Dark Shadows has a mixture of heel, baby face, heel, baby, like. Mm-hmm. I use the term on this show a lot. So,
and what that move also does is it doesn't turn the show into a competition between Barnabas and Quentin. It allows them to coexist.
Yeah.
And even in the Jonathan Frid documentary, Selby even remarked that, there was, Jonathan Frid was actually grateful for Selby to take some of the load off of him.
It really, when John Carlin's Carl goes to the mausoleum with Quentin, and then Quentin locks him in, it's like, oh crap. It's like, see it, Carl, but then he gets out. he figures it out.
Mm-hmm.
I like Pansy Faye, the spirit of Pansy Faye or Letitia Faye or one of the two goes into, like you said, Trask's daughter, and she starts being the dancer, the singer. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of? Now Roger Davis went from playing Wilkes to playing Charles Delaware Tate. What were your thoughts on that?
I thought it was a much better use of Davis's talents, because
Yeah.
nothing wrong with Wilkins, but Wilkins was basically, he was vampire fodder. Like, we all know this.
Yeah.
And I think it might have been just a question of, okay, well, Roger, we'll slot you in here for this amount of time. You get time off, we'll slot you in a much better role. Because, and we've talked about this before, because Roger Davis brings a slightly more urgent energy to the affair. And I think, especially now that you've got David Selby, who has a similar kind of straightforward, flat out energy, it gives the storyline a little bit more, it makes it a lot more dynamic, where it's not just okay, the usual, but then you've got a new element. And I think here's where the writers and the production staff and Dan Curtis kind of realized, hey, look, we've got a cast here. Let's start mixing them into different combinations and seeing what happens.
I really like to me, Patofe is like the Shadow, and Aristide and Tate are like his agents.
Right.
They're their incognito too, and only in the sense of Tate is, yes, he's Charles Delaware Tate. He's this famous painter, but what you don't know is he's working for this evil guy over here, which was just when you thought 1897 couldn't get any more intriguing, wrong.
Yeah, Aristide is the Harry. If Patofi is the Shadow, Aristide is his Harry Vincent.
Yep, absolutely. I would say I would say that oh god, Charles Delaware Tate is his Cliff Marsland, we'll say.
Okay.
I'll give him that one. Or better yet, Clyde Burke would be another one too.
No problem.
Sorry, get off topic. But I do think that they do a really good job of giving him these underneath lanes where they're loyal. And even Aristide sort of reminds Tate, hey, like, you're not supposed to be here. When Tate comes to the lair, Aristide scolds him, and I love that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's really well done. Again, our buddy Patrick McCrae calls this the Ragnarok. I agree. It's just boom.
Yeah, it's the rough draft of what'll happen during the 1840 storyline.
Yeah.
And here where you get the sense the writers are just, they're basically just they're just like, okay, we gotta do something, we want to, because this is when the show had its highest ratings. So they were like, okay, we got to keep doing this. We got to keep doing this to keep the ratings up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there is that sense of, it would be interesting to see whether there was like internal pressure to keep it going, or they would like internal, like, Dan Curtis just maybe like had a bad burrito one morning and was like, hey, if things don't happen the way I want them to, I'm going to fire everyone.
I think interesting too with 1897. Like you said, you don't feel this doesn't feel safe. Like with Patofe, like you think things are going to just go bad, especially when he gets the hand. Once the
Right.
hand's back on Patofe, it's like, oh, this just got real bad now.
Yeah, it gets to the point, and I'm going to spoil this. At one point during the 1897 storyline, Barnabas gets staked.
Yep.
And that's where I could see people going, whoa, he can't be staked. We love him.
Yeah. When I saw this on the Sci-Fi Network and Barnabas got staked, I'm like, no, no. And then it's like, it's so shocking, right?
And they did the even crueler thing of they kind of let David Selby and the Patofi storyline head for a couple more weeks. Yeah. So they didn't do the because the twist is, yes, there was a magical doppelganger for Barnabas.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. It wasn't like Friday Barnabas gets staked and Monday he's like, but I'm feeling better, or 'tis but a scratch. Monty Python on Dark Shadows, I'd love to see that.
They really leave you hanging for a bit that Barnabas, it's like you do really feel that Barnabas is gone. That's the feeling they give. Mm-hmm. And I think the best hint of his comeback is when Julia tells Quentin, I think this is right before the body switch happens of Patofe and Quentin, that mm-hmm. somebody's coming to help. And somebody's going to be Barnabas, obviously. And here you're right. Angelique did a spell. Now, she did this very same spell in 1897 where she was sitting at the table and she needed somebody to witness her. And she's just sitting there and she disappears and Laura goes to hell. And what Angelique did was she doubled herself. So we've already seen this trick once. We then get it with Barnabas, and mm-hmm. It's really, really well done. I love how they have, like, Jonathan Fritz standing there, and they open the coffin, and there's a body double of Jonathan Fritz. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think they might have used a photo because that clip, it looks a little too realistic to be. Now, I could be wrong, but it looks a little too much like Jonathan Fritz to be just a body double. Because you actually see like a full face.
You do, yep.
But, it's this is when the show is like, what, I'm sure that there are plenty of like 4 p.m. happy hours where the writers are like, okay, what the hell can we get away with this week? Let's give Quentin 2 heads. No, we can't do that. Hey, let's have Laura Parker spin fire, maybe have her belly dance. No, that's not too good either.
They do a really good job, though. And I love how Fred's like, that's him. What a performance he gives. And I really love the fact that once you get Sarah David playing Quentin mm-hmm. and David Selby playing Patofe. What did you think of that?
It was interesting. I mean, it really... I'm sure for Thayer David it was relatively easy because he was a seasoned pro at that point. Yeah. I think the real test would have been Selby as Patofe. Yeah, that's his new name, Selby. Selby as Patofe. Selfie. It's a word I just made up. Because this is his this is Selby's first major role. So he's gone from being silent and scary. Yeah. To kind of arrogant jerk, to becoming babyface jerk, and now he's not only going back to being a heel, he's also copying another actor's He's trying to copy a character that another actor's performed, but he has to kind of leave out some stuff. It would be like if I were to portray our good friend Patrick McRae. I might soften my voice a bit. I don't think I would shave my head. I don't think I would necessarily grow a beard. And I think what I would do is I would just throw in any gratuitous 1970s reference because it would make sense. And I think you would agree that's a pretty good approximation of Patrick McRae. In fact, I think C2E2 this year, I'm going to cosplay as Patrick McRae. See if anyone notices. And I'm sure Patrick's watching this and going, "Oh God, he is regretting introducing me to you right now. I guarantee it."
Well, if he's watching this, Patrick, man, do you have the head of Judah Zachary? You could tell us. We're your friends.
Yeah. I think he has it. I think he has it. It's like, he's got his living room. He's like, okay, here's one of the latex appendages from the Planet of the Apes movie in 1968. Here is the pork pie hat that Darren McGavin wore as Kolchak. And yes, you see that? That is the head of Judah Zachary. It is not a replica. It is not a dummy head. It is the actual head of a 17th century warlock.
Yeah, I believe it. But what did you think of? They actually I love how they introduced King Johnny Romano here, and they put Magda on trial for what she's done. What did you think of that?
I think it was good. I think that, if you're going to introduce stakes, Magda doesn't really care about the Collins family. I mean, again, she and Sandor are squatting in the old house. Yeah. So yeah, you need that kind of sense of what you did is wrong, and you need to, because it's with Willie, Barnabas could, intimidate him because Willie was just this basic con man who was hanging out with Jason McGuire, who coincidentally looked like Paul Stoddard. Like, he was kind of he really didn't have much of a life. It was probably like, I think being a vampire's, thrall would be, hell would be like Club Med. You know what I mean? It would be very simple. But with Sandor and Magda, Magda was kind of Sandor was probably a little bit more amenable even before Barnabas, but Magda was like defiant. So yeah, I think she needed to be put in her place, and that's the way you put someone in their place dramatically.
I really like the character King Johnny Romano too. I really love that they're introducing this type of character and they're giving this consequence to her. They're letting her know, hey, this isn't going to go unpunished here. And it just goes to show Dark Shadows really dealt in realistic consequence it made you appreciate the show.
I mean, especially since like soap operas at this time, it would usually be like there'd be the miracle. It's like they're in a car accident, they're in a coma, and you'd have a loved one saying, might be their significant other coming in saying, "Oh, I love you. If you only wake up, I'll marry you and be loving." And they wake up. Yep. Dark Shadows is kind of like there aren't too many like Dark Shadows doesn't engage in Deus Ex Machina a lot. It really uses it sparingly, and I think that's what helps get why I think people enjoy it. There's no real sense of okay, well, we're just going to every time you think there's going to be an easy way out, there isn't. And I think that's what gives Dark Shadows its edge, is that there's very few instances where the writers pull something out of a hat in order. Most of the hat pulling out of a hat is time travel stuff.
Yeah.
You've got seance, you've got a wing, you've got a staircase, you've got the I Ching. Like I'm sure that if the show went on, if it involved like say smoking cigars and drinking brandy, they do that, and Roger would go back in time.
Yeah. What did you think of Kitty Soames?
I think it's a great variation. I like the character because it's the first time where we kind of get a character who we expect is going to kind of, give the Collins family a comeuppance, because basically she's married Edward just to get his money.
Yeah.
And the fact that we later find out she's Josette reincarnated is this perfect reversal on the character. In 1795, Josette's this kind of pure-hearted, lovely, wonderful person, and Kitty Soames is just like a gold digger, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the fact that I love the scene where she gets pulled into the painting. I love
Yes.
that is such a callback to the first appearance of Josette's ghost when she's walking out of the portrait. It's so well done.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you think of after they switch back? You have Quentin's back in his own body, but not before. And Aristide still thinks it's Patofe, and he tells Aristide, "Okay, go kill Quentin," when it's really Patofe's back in his own body. What did you think of that?
That's Quentin being, going back to being his usual heel. He's doing it for the right reason, but it shows Quentin's intelligence, because to this point, he's always been presented as kind of the doesn't want to work, doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to drink and mess around with women but I think it also shows that Quentin, it's that, again, if Quentin is the bad guy starting to do good things, he's taking advantage of that bad guy stuff to do something positive.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, Patofi not only did he switch minds with him, but he basically had the painting painted of Quentin without his consent and made Quentin immortal. I mean, there's that scene where Patofi takes the glass, scratches Quentin, and Quentin's like, "Whoa, dude!" And Patofi's like, "Hey, where's the blood?" And you see the painting bleed.
Yep.
And so I think Quentin would have been in his, I'm sure that his backup plan were if Aristide failed, he would have killed Patofi himself.
Yep. He does. He stabs him. It's really good. But here's where we get Garth Blackwood, and Patofi summons him. What did you think of this creepy character?
I think it was a good way to show that this is a guy who's not going to go quietly.
Yep.
And this is not a, if you create a big bad, you don't get rid of them that easily. You know what I mean? You don't, and I think that for Patofi, it's like, okay, he's got to salvage something out of his plan, so he's going to call in backup.
Yeah. Something I think Dark Shadows did so well too with Patofi that I think a lot of big time horror franchises do too with characters like Michael Myers, Freddy, and Jason is they left you in suspense of, did Patofi die?
Right.
They left it as a question mark. And I think horror does not give Dark Shadows enough credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think that it's also a gimmick. It's also a gimmick when you use it badly, like the Scream movies.
Right.
The first Scream, brilliant. But after that, you kind of know that, they know the rules, and they're saying, "Hey, we know the rules. We're going to tweak them." Yeah. I'm trying to think of, because I was just watching something that kind of had a similar. I actually earlier tonight I was watching The Abominable Dr. Fives from 1971. It's a movie that freaked me out when I first saw it at like 5-6 years old, and it's one of those where not going to spoil it. Go see this movie from 1971, Vincent Price. But at the end, it's assumed that the lead character has died.
Right.
And then they actually play an orchestral version of Over the Rainbow. Trust me, it makes sense. And as it stops, you hear this laugh. this really evil laugh. And when you set up if you set up this person is not dead, you have an automatic responsibility to, in the next film, make sure that you did not waste that moment.
Yeah.
And I think with most horror franchises, you don't waste that moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's rarely wasted. Scream, I think, is one of those few that actually did waste it. But we're talking about Dark Shadows here.
Yeah, Dark Shadows did not waste it. They left you hanging with a "Is he dead?" question mark, big time, and it's so well done.
And I could see where, again, in the band of parallel time where Dark Shadows went on past 71, they probably would have brought the character back. They might have maybe hired Michael Stroka again to play him.
Yeah.
But make him make him someone who's like, yes, I used my magic to change my appearance, or maybe if David would have been interested, maybe have him set him up as a big bad against Professor Stokes. I mean, that's one thing Professor Stokes needed. He should have had his own arch enemy, because it seemed like Stokes was he was the guy you called in to be Mr. Exposition. It would have been really cool to see Professor Stokes take on an enemy. And that's why I would say have Michael Stroka play Patofi, because that way you can get both men in a scene. And I'm sure right now Patrick McRae is like rubbing his scalp going, "Gordon, how dare you? No. But I open challenge to Patrick. And if you're willing.
Absolutely.
He and I come on here, we can do a hypothetical how we would run Dark Shadows if it weren't canceled.
There you go. I'll contact Patrick and see if he wants to do that next weekend. That way, I'll just let you guys go, and I'll just sit here, because that's a really great one. I like that. Here's the thing too: the fact that they do this, it keeps the character around. Even though you don't see him, you get the sense of he's not really gone. And I think it's something Dark Shadows does so well with their characters, that the ones that aren't gone, but it's like, okay, I know they're out there, but the fact that I know they're out there just makes it all the more intriguing. I think that's something it does so well. The suspense of Dark Shadows is done very, very well. I think we actually did cover everything, which is great. Is there anything you want to add?
Just that this really is. I think this storyline may be the closest that Dark Shadows has come to a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I hate saying that because it sounds very extreme and like hyperbole. And I don't think Dark Shadows is really. I think the entire series is a masterpiece, but I think this is really the crown jewel in the masterpiece.
My favorite time period is actually 1995, because when I was watching Dark Shadows, it's like, what else can they do to really surprise me? And when I saw 1995 and how terrifying that was, those 9 episodes, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of one of those where I kind of wish, and if Patrick and I want to discuss it in a future episode, Patrick, I'm daring you, that I think that could have been it would have been interesting, instead of doing the 1970 parallel time story, do maybe just make it the aftermath of every single battle that's been fought so far. Yeah. And how do we rebuild? And that becomes their mission. Yeah. And then through this, they realize, okay, well, what we found is here's the clue that makes them go back. And so you still get to do the 1840 parallel time, the 1840, storyline. You just get to add some more layers of mystery and really make it into, they're not just going back they're going back because they know the damage that has been done. Yeah. And they've tried to rebuild. And here's a way to kind of make sure that, they've left Collinwood in 1995 in okay hands, but they're going to try to stop it before then. So they know that, like, even if they don't prevent it, they know that they've done something good.
Yeah. Dark Shadows is to me, it's the best television series ever. I mean, ever. It's that awesome. And if you guys watch it, it's on Tubi for free.
Free. And second note, if you have a browser with a really good ad blocker like Brave, you don't have to worry about commercials.
Yeah.
It'll just pause for a second and then go right, So you can get dark shit. You can do what Patrick McRae did and watch every single episode from start to finish.
Very, very nice. Very, very.
And then you can go up to Patrick and say, "Oh, okay, where's my daybook, bro? Where's my column?" I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to Patrick, but because it's like, I respect him, and quite frankly, it's I'm more the Doctor Who guy, so that's probably where I would be like the most arrogant. So, but yeah, I'm sure there's going to be people who watch it and are like, "Oh, I could do this." And to those who are watching or thinking that, you can't. Only Patrick McRae can, because he's brilliant.
Patrick is a super genius. He really is. Very, very smart man. For Gordon, I'm resident. First of all, Gordon, thank you, dude. Thank you for coming on here. I had a blast, man.
No problem.
Link to Gordon's Amazon page will be in the description box. Link to the Dark Shadows Daybook, where you can get it, is going to be in the description box. Gordon, man, it's always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
You have a good night.
You too.